Okay, I think we should start, and people will join as we go. So welcome everyone who is here so far, and I hope you are safe and healthy wherever you are connecting from. Oh, Luba, hello.
Yes, I'm here.
There you are.
Hi.
Okay. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about this whole idea around this webinar series, how it came about, tell you a little bit more about Impact Hub Moscow in particular, who is the host, and then I'll introduce you to the speakers and we'll take it over from there. So we started this webinar series about a month ago as a way for us to get people together and start a conversation around what's happening with the pandemic and how social enterprises are responding. I think there was a lack of understanding like what each individual is experiencing, and just relying on the news and what's out there was not enough for us. So we wanted to get sort of like first-hand information and knowledge. And we conducted a few episodes within our community in Russia. And then we thought that this is a crazy time of when everywhere around the world, we're pretty much experiencing similar things. And as much as it seems a little bit odd to connect maybe Australia and Russia, who are so far away, and the time zones, as you can tell, are very, very different right now. So it's 11 a.m. here, and I believe it's 6 p.m. in Melbourne. But realize that there might be things that social entrepreneurs are going through, and there might be some great ideas locally in Australia and locally in Russia or in India that we could share and learn from each other, and maybe use to improve some of our practices and move forward and support each other. So this is how it all started. And Impact Hub, for those of you who are connecting from other countries and don't know, is a global network focused on building entrepreneurial communities for impact at scale. There are more than 100 impact hubs around the world, based in most big cities across the globe. And every impact hub is very much embedded in the cultural realities of where it was founded, because the founders are local, and we respond to the local themes and local problems. But we sort of share the same ideology that we want to make this a world better, and we want to create it the way that it works for everybody, that it's inclusive and everybody can reach their potential. So I think this makes us so relevant and close to Foundation for Young Australians in our idea and what we're trying to do. Approaches might be a little bit different. I think the scale of impact that Foundation of Young Australians does is a little bit bigger than Impact Hub Moscow. So we're looking forward to learning from you. And so with that, I wanted to introduce the speakers. So we have Mэтью Benitti, who is head of social innovation at Foundation for Young Australians, and he is responsible for building and supporting an ecosystem of young people leading leading social change, starting social enterprises. And he'll talk a little bit more about his role, so I'm not going to tell too much so I don't say something wrong. And then we have Sakshi Kapoor, who is a social entrepreneur. She's also based in Melbourne, but she runs a social enterprise in India that is called Humanism. And it helps people living in rural, underserved communities in southern India to get dignified job opportunities, support themselves. And she produces, I would say, broadly merchandise for events and corporations, but in particular, it's tote bags and vineyards and things that all big businesses need. And she'll also talk a little bit more about her connection with FYA and her social enterprise. And from the Russian side, we have Lyubov Ermolaeva, who is also a social entrepreneur. She's the founder of BuySocial. I call it a marketplace for social entrepreneurs, for products produced by social enterprises across Russia. And she also sells on eBay, so it's truly global right now. And she'll also share a little bit more about what her business is doing during these times, and we'll dive in. So without more of me rambling too much, Matt, I wanted to turn to you first and First of all, I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit more about FYA and what you do, in particular within your role. And then I'll ask you some more questions. So I'll let you start.
Sure. Thank you, Anna. And thank you for the invitation to participate. It is really exciting to connect with Russia. And I've just seen in the chat that there's also someone dialing in from Berlin. So it's truly worldwide.
Yeah.
But I work at an organization called the Foundation for Young Australians. So we're a national not-for-profit that's been around since the 1980s. It was actually started by the Queen of England, decided that Australia needed a foundation for young people. And so we basically exist to prepare young people for the social, environmental and economic challenges that they're going to face over the coming decade. So we've got a research team that looks at particularly the future of work and the impact of automation and the skills that young people are going to need to be prosperous and successful in the world of work, but also at the specific environmental and social issues that young people are going to have to navigate. And then based on that research, we run a number of programs, anywhere between kind of 5 and 10 throughout the year, designed to prepare young people and empower young people and give young people platforms to go out and be successful, I guess, in the face of those issues that they're going to face. So in particular, I work with 18 to 29-year-old social entrepreneurs. We have a very broad definition of what a social entrepreneur is in our program. So it is both those that are trading, but also we work with campaigns and entrepreneurs and researchers and thought leaders, all of whom have a focus or an initiative or project that is designed to address a social issue. So we offer a whole suite of supports. It's primarily done through a program called Young Social Pioneers, where we do a big call out across the country and bring together around 60 young social entrepreneurs from across Australia and deliver a program that provides them with the skills and networks and resources to go out and be sustainable and impactful and successful with the initiatives that they're working on. So that program has been running for about 10 years. And then after they go through that, they get access to a whole suite of supports that that are very kind of tailored and responsive to whatever their needs are on an ongoing basis. So I lead that program with a little team here in Australia.
Okay, that you actually anticipated one of the questions that I had for you. I wanted to ask you about how you define social enterprise in Australia. And you said something a little bit, but as far as I understand, you don't limit it to a for-profit legal structure.
No, it's actually it's a bit of a hot topic. There's debate on it in Australia. So probably probably the most credible, I suppose, organisation in Australia. There's two actually. One called Social Traders, and another called the Centre for Social Impact. So they do have a more sort of stringent definition of it that talks about the need to be a for-profit and to intervene in a complex social issue, either through manufacturing, your trade, or how you're distributing your profits. But having spoken to those organisations, they're also very comfortable with other entities defining it in the way that kind of best suits the work that they're doing. So I think everyone's now gotten to a point where we're comfortable having different definitions of it to some degree.
So, but it's up to a social enterprise, initially, an entity to define itself, what they want to, how they want to do.
Well, that seems to be what's happening. So different organizations who work with social enterprises have more confined or broader definitions of it, depending on what their purpose is and how they're kind of operating. For us, it's much wider because we sort of want to empower young people in lots of different ways, but there are other organizations that are a bit more specific in the ways that they define it.
And how did connection with Sakshi come about? Like what does humanism have in relations to FYA? Could you please a little bit tell us how it all
Shall I do that one, Sakshi?
Connected? It's up to you. Yeah.
I vividly remember the moment I met Sakshi. Actually, she had a friend who came through the Young Social Pioneers program the year before who introduced us, and we met actually in the hub Melbourne, which I think at one point was an impact hub in Melbourne. So we actually met in a former impact hub in Melbourne.
Okay.
But yeah, so
So there's more connection. There's more connection.
There is actually more connection. Yeah, yeah, we know a few different impact hubs around the world. But yeah, so Sakshi and I just had a conversation about the Young Social Pioneers program, and she came highly recommended by a number of people and applied, and was successful in getting into the 2017. Am I getting that right? I am getting that right. 18, and 18. Sorry, program, and has since gone on to become what we call a YLab associate at FYA, which is basically we employ young people as consultants to work on different projects to sort of give young people a voice in corporate and government and community projects. So we now also are colleagues.
So your partner,
as well as, yeah.
So your partner organizations, they use your consultants for their projects?
No, Sakshi actually is one of our consultants, as well as running humanism. So she also works on our team. Yeah.
Oh, so you hire young people to be consultants for your own projects, or for partner organizations and businesses that work with you in this field as well?
So this is not so this is very separate to what Sakshi does with humanism. It's basically got nothing to do with it. So yeah, FYA has an arm of what we do called YLab, and it's sort of a co-design consultancy, and they go and work with government, business, and the not-for-profit sector on various projects. And we employ young people aged 18 to 29 on a consultancy basis, and they go out and lead the delivery of those projects, basically. And the idea is that we're giving young people a voice in spaces that they otherwise haven't traditionally gotten access to.
That's fantastic. I think this is a very unique program, and I've never heard of anything similar before, at least in our market.
No.
So maybe we can
I don't think there's many around the world.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to talk a little bit more about it, but I wanted to turn us back to COVID, since it was something that claimed in the description we'll talk about. So I understand you communicate with social entrepreneurs a lot, and you have several generations that came to the program 10 years ago, now probably successful big businesses and some of newer ones. And if you could maybe summarize and talk about some of the challenges that you noted for yourself, and some of the trends, and maybe less a publicized one that we all know about, like what businesses are facing right now from reading stories online. But I think social entrepreneurs are less so talked about. So if you have any insights, any thoughts in it, love to hear more.
I mean, just generally, Australia has responded, at least compared to the rest of the world, quite well. So just to give you like a general overview, I think we've had 7,000 and something cases in Australia, and around 90 deaths, which is quite low sort of compared to the rest of the world. And that was probably a result of like some pretty decisive and very large scale action that the government took quite early. So we've all been in social isolation for a good 6 or 8 weeks now. And in the first few weeks of that period, we were trying to sort of work out what our response was going to be and how we were going to support social entrepreneurs. So I ended up having meetings with around 70 or so social entrepreneurs from the Young Social Pioneers program, just to hear how the virus was impacting like themselves, but also their work. And it was terrifying, actually. There were some really like quite scary kind of outcomes of it. Both like for them personally, so like the impact on their education and their travel and their living circumstances was quite extreme, but also for their social enterprises. So the ones that are in any way reliant on bringing people together have had to take most of their programs online. And I think they would agree when I say that the impact that they're able to achieve online isn't quite as deep and meaningful as it might be otherwise.
And what kind of businesses are those? Like, could you give an example so we can?
Yeah. So there's
understand
one called the Man Cave, which runs in-school programs with young men around positive masculinity. So young men behaving in a way that is, how do I describe that?
Respectful, probably to other gender.
Yeah. So normally they would physically go into schools and run a program with the kids. So really, like some kids from some disadvantaged, problematic backgrounds, and like really have a very heartfelt experience with them, for them to better understand the impact that their behaviour can have on other people. So they're really, really successful at delivering that program across Melbourne and Victoria, which is where we live. But school has basically stopped, so the kids aren't in the classroom anymore. So they've had to take that program online. But I don't think, from what I understand, that the experience for the young people is like quite as meaningful, and you know, that sense of connection isn't as deep as it might be otherwise. That said, so some are kind of like finding it hard, but there are others, because of the situation that we're all in, who are finding that there's just increased demand on their services, and they're having to sort of adapt what they do to respond to that. So just to give you another example, there's been a lot of focus on, and this is probably the scariest impact, but domestic violence. And because people are sort of trapped in a house with perpetrators, reporting on that is really difficult. And both young people and women in particular are really in some pretty scary situations.
The world stats are really scary at the moment.
Yeah, it is really scary. Yeah. So we've got a social entrepreneur named Zoe who runs an organization called She's a Crowd, which gets women to report on locations and experiences of gender-based violence. And then she captures all of that data and uses that data to inform decision makers about where gender-based violence is taking place and better inform decisions that they make. So she's adapting that process to be also like an online reporting platform for women, because picking up the phone and like having a conversation with someone while the perpetrator is potentially in the house is just not possible. So so you know, they're very they've been very quick to respond, and I think that's an advantage of being a social entrepreneur, is that you're sort of small enough and agile enough that you can kind of quickly respond to the environment. And I think just inherent in what they do is a sense of creativity and optimism and self-belief in their ability to kind of adapt in this environment.
And it's blossoming now, I see, in some cases, right? So Sakshi, I wanted to turn to you, and could you tell us a little bit more about what you do, and then in relation to COVID, since you work in 2 countries, how it affected you here and there? Tell us a little bit more about it.
I think you did a really good job of explaining what we do, which is essentially create jobs for women living in low-income communities or poverty in South India, in a small town called Pondicherry. And we provide them education through the ethical handmade event merchandise that they make for Australian corporations like universities and big makeup brands like Mecca. The next question was, so we are heavily reliant on the sales that we make in Australia with the organizations like universities, based on the events that they're having, so that we can employ the women in India. And so with COVID in the picture, that's meant that people are social distancing, there's no events happening, and therefore we don't really have the B2B sales to sustain the employment we were creating in India through that model. So what that's meant for us is we've had to be really proactive in pivoting. So now we're focusing on some B2C sales, which we never thought we'd do. And I think what was really good from our end that we never thought would work or would be something that would happen is we ended up saving some money on the side with all the profits we were making after paying all the women and making sure all the expenses were covered, just in case we needed it. And so that's just in case we needed it.
Way before COVID came into picture. Okay.
Yeah, I've always kind of been that person who always just saves money on the side for a rainy day. in my
That's a
personal life,
note
but
to
also
take
just
for social entrepreneurs listening. Just take some money aside. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also a factor of like having experience in not doing that and suffering the consequences of it. I've always done that. And I'm not saying we had a lot saved. We didn't have a lot saved, but we had enough to make sure that the women would get paid during COVID, because lockdown period was quite prolonged and India maybe didn't do a great job. Well, in my opinion, didn't do a great job of addressing COVID for those communities.
And well, so how, I understand that you are in Melbourne, so you're managing the work in India remotely. Did COVID change that for you extremely, or was it just mode operandi before and you did it for like months and years? So how did that change for you?
Yeah, good question. So with humanism, one of our priorities was to make sure that the project was community driven and led, so that it's sustainable without us. And so I think we got to that point where in my recent trip to India, which was in January and February, so just before COVID got to the stage where we had to have lockdowns, we set up the system in place for the people running the center now, being women that used to be a part of the center, not needing us as much as they needed our guidance in the start. By that I mean I used to WhatsApp call them every day. Now I sort of gradually got to the habit of WhatsApp calling them once a week, so they know what they're doing by themselves and they take the proactive initiative through that. So I think what's changed is not because of COVID, but because of the fact that we created a sustainable model that meant that the women didn't need to talk to us every day. What also changed is the working condition because of COVID though. And so some of the women worked from home during lockdown periods where we had to shut down our tailoring center. When we didn't shut down our tailoring center and the borders were closed, where we couldn't get any event merchandise coming from India to Australia, the women then created masks for local hospitals because there was a demand and supply issue with the PPE masks available. And so the next best thing were handmade masks out of the cotton that we had on hand. So yeah, I think those are the two things that really...
And you managed to solve it, as far as I'm saying, not just donate it, which I think is important for supporting you at the moment.
Yeah. So we sold about, I think it was 5,000 masks all up that we've made. But when we say we sold it at such a cheap rate because, look, at the end of the day, we sold it at a cheap rate and that's actually fine because it just covers our costs. And at this point, we're not trying to thrive, we're just trying to survive.
I want to ask all of you this question. Probably kind of jumping ahead, but it just appeared in my head right now. So do you think now businesses will be operating in a mode that is kind of like always be prepared for a potential crisis ahead? I feel like, before we were just all strategizing for growth and expansion, like with that kind of mindset. So next year we'll be bigger or something like that. Do you think now we all have like this fear? So we have to keep in mind that there might be a crisis somewhere down the line and we need to be prepared. Do you think that changed or not so much? And I think it will be interesting to hear from all of you because you represent such different perspectives and different backgrounds. Who wants to go first? Okay, Luba, let's start with you. I mean, I know I'll go back to you and ask you to tell us more about By Social, but let you talk first because you haven't yet.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I'm thinking about it too, because, before I was kind of still try to wait until the self-isolation period is over and we'll start doing the same thing again. But now I'm really thinking about adaptation strategies. What if the same self-isolation period will happen again in autumn? What should we do? I have some ideas which came to my mind just this week, honestly. On the other hand, so I think on one hand that we will think about all these different possibilities and make plan A, plan B, and plan C, and would be able to navigate our actions more freely. But on the other hand, with crises, as with this crisis, nobody could predict that it would happen, that it will be exactly like this, that it will be not a financial crisis as 12 years ago, for example, not some other sort of crisis, but healthcare crisis. Nobody could predict it. So what economists also say, that we always preparing for the crisis which have already passed. So which means that we don't know what sort of crisis will come in the future. It might be something different, and we'll have to adapt in a different way. So I think it's the most important is to learn, really like to change your mindset a little bit, and
so resilience.
Yeah, exactly. To become more flexible, to learn different, because especially with social entrepreneurs, we have our mission, we have our goal, we know what for we're doing this, but in terms of how we are doing it, we have to be more open and flexible and learn to adapt to all different circumstances which might happen to us.
Wow, that's okay. That's great. I think I have a lot of thoughts in my head on that, but I want to hear what everybody else is thinking. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't.
No, I agree with all of that. I was reading a piece of research earlier that said the gig economy is going to boom because employers are going to be reluctant to employ ongoing staff for a period of time.
And could you please tell a little bit about gig economy? I know it's a very common term now, like in the Western world, but some of the Russian listeners might not know just a little bit more what that is.
Sure. So that's so it's like Uber or a car sharing service, for example. So it's when an organization like Uber doesn't employ someone to provide a service as an employee, but they outsource them on a contract basis, and they're given work on a sort of on-demand basis, as opposed to them becoming kind of ongoing sustained employees with access to superannuation and things like that. So there's quite a lot operating in Australia, providing car services, or sort of Air Tasker, which provides random kind of handyman stuff, for example. So
it's really blossoming here as well. But I think just the term gig economy is not that known, just the term itself, but the businesses are in place.
I think COVID is going to accelerate things like that. Like, it's really brought into focus the fact that like it is possible for us all to work from home. Like for me, it hasn't actually been that disruptive. So I think employers might sort of shift in that way and sort of be more willing to adopt new technology, because in this environment they've sort of been forced into it, or engage more in the gig economy. So I think they might change in those ways. I think there'll definitely be a lot of attention given to risk management plans when everyone kind of gets back to the office. I'm expecting that is going to happen at FYA, where I work, and that potential kind of major crises will get sort of pushed up and considered a bit more seriously than they may have been otherwise in terms of priorities. I do think the government is going to invest a lot in infrastructure, in particular. For, like, when we responded to the global financial crisis in 2008, you sort of saw the government invest a lot in infrastructure projects, and also energy projects. So I kind of expect there'll be some industries that might actually kind of go out and boom following this, and that there's others that may suffer. But kind of thinking about social entrepreneurs in particular, I think like we've already seen the philanthropic and investment environment become much more conservative with their willingness to put money into social causes, as well as the
they're not willing to do that at the moment.
It's really slowed down. It's very worrying, and as well as the corporate social responsibility as well. So there's going to be a period of time where just access to money for social entrepreneurs is going to be really, really hard, and that probably will lead to a lot of them falling over. And I think like what needs to happen is probably corporates who are the best resource to sort of take the plunge, is that we need to kind of encourage them to start investing and kind of give that confidence to public philanthropists and private investors to start putting money back into the sector. So yeah, my feeling is there's going to be like a very hard period of time, probably a few years following this, that everyone's going to have to navigate before things maybe get something close back to what's normal.
I want to ask you a follow-up question on that, but I'd love to hear Sakshi speak about this first from her perspective. Sakshi, what do you think about the mentality change?
I'll be quick.
It's okay.
I think from a social entrepreneur's perspective, for me personally anyways, it's always been like, if it's not COVID, it's something else. Like there's always an obstacle and it just looks different at each stage of your business. I think the interesting thing with COVID is it's a challenge that everyone's facing together. And there's something beautiful about that in itself. I think with the social entrepreneur specifically, our beautiful skill is that we're passionately stubborn about our mission and vision. And so I think we're just more capable of having the mindset of how am I going to overcome this? And I think that will stay the same regardless of the challenges that come across post-COVID. What will change though is investors' appetite and how they assess the kind of startups or social enterprises they want to invest in. I think they're going to do more A/B testing. The A/B testing is going to change. They're going to do more due diligence. They're going to ask more questions about COVID. Actually, I think there'll be more questions about how would you sustain something like sustain during a period like COVID. I think that will be a more prominent question amongst startups and investors.
That's really good to keep in mind. So basically, you think social entrepreneurs will have to adapt more of business mentality? Well, we spoke earlier today, so some of them are still operating as nonprofits and heavily relying on the service and grants and philanthropical support. But then in this reality, if they want investor money, they have to really adapt the business mindset and talk about themselves as businesses that have like a plan for risks, risk management plans. Is that what I'm hearing? Or
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think that every social enterprise is looking for investment. I think social enterprises that are looking for philanthropic funding are different. They'll face different questions to investors. I just realized that because I'm in Australia and we don't have that really cool legislation that you guys have at the moment for social enterprises, I'm positioned as a for-purpose, for-profit business. So I'm always thinking like a business. When COVID and other obstacles come, I think we have the same mindset on how we're going to overcome this.
Matt, just to explain to you a little bit more, the legislation that Sakshi mentioned, and we talked about it earlier, is that about a year ago, Russia passed a law that basically defines the social enterprise. So we can either operate now within this legal definition of what the social enterprise is, and it puts some strict limitations on what we can call a social enterprise, and what kind of companies can be qualified for governmental support and grants. And then there's sort of a broader social enterprise definition that we use at Impact Hub, and I think it's very similar to what you use. And we're now even talking about like how we might be shifting to impact entrepreneurship and using that term instead to kind of define the companies that we're working on. So even though without legal status, we're still struggling, and there's still a lot of conversation going on. What's right, what's not? Should the legal definition be more defined or broadened? So it's a constant question. And so I wanted to ask you, Matt, about the COVID response fund that you launched and that you said you closed pretty quickly. So are you working with those philanthropists right now? Like, are you using this as an opportunity to get people together? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, we're trying to. So very quickly after those conversations, we looked at like how we were going to respond, and we're doing a few things in terms of supporting some advocates, like youth-led advocacy at the moment. But the other thing we're doing is offering small grants to social entrepreneurs, young social entrepreneurs. So we had to turn that around really, really quickly, just because we saw the urgency that was that existed across the sector. So we're actually offering it in 3 different rounds. So FYA itself has put up an amount of money to cover this first round, and we're currently going through a fundraising process with philanthropists and some of our existing corporate partners to potentially put up some more money, which we will allocate in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, but purely for the sake of time and understanding the urgency of it. FYA has covered this first round, and then we're currently in the process of hopefully securing some more money for the later rounds.
Yeah, and what kind of businesses what kind of requests do you normally like? That's not the right question, but typical probably needs that you face with.
To be honest, I haven't read them all yet. That's happening this weekend.
Okay.
So it closed at midday today, but we're thinking about 2 different kinds of sort of approaches. So one where a social enterprise is intervening in a sort of immediate and urgent current need. So if someone sort of, a young person is suffering either through domestic violence or access to basic living needs, or their mental health and so forth, and require an immediate intervention, we'll support that. But we're also thinking about the sort of systemic, longer term impacts of COVID, and supporting young people who may be running an enterprise that seeks to address what some of the longer term outcomes of COVID might be.
And so now I kind of want to turn back to a social entrepreneur's perspective. Like Sakshi, if you were to apply for some kind of support, or if you were thinking about getting some kind of support, what do you think are the most like urgent needs for you as a social entrepreneur now, aside from like funding, maybe mentorship, or like what kind of help comes to mind? And I think would be interesting to learn to ask Luba the same. We have been, I know sometimes as a social entrepreneur, like, yes, you're struggling, but you're sort of used to solving a lot of issues on your own. And at this time, has something like changed dramatically that you can get help with? And intermediate organizations like FYA or Impact Hub or any other supporters could step in and like be more aware of those needs.
I think the biggest support, other than funding for social entrepreneurs like myself, is community. I think during times like these, having a community of social entrepreneurs, because they're so rare already in Melbourne, having a community to talk to about the challenges and learn from each other is probably the biggest thing that could be helpful to us during this time. And I think FYA has been really great at creating that for us, both in person and virtually during these times. So yeah, if it's not funding, which is my first point of support that I think we require during this time, it's definitely a community.
Luba, could you please tell us a little bit more? And also want to hear a bit more about bisocial, because we haven't talked about it yet.
Yeah, answering your question, I think I agree with Sakshi about community and sharing with our peer social entrepreneurs is one important thing, and it's also like moral support in this situation. Another thing is spreading the word about social entrepreneurship, because together and with the help of such organizations like yours, like Impact Hub, or your organization in Australia, of course, we have more power to spread the word and to basically deliver the message that people and companies can support social entrepreneurs by purchasing their products, that how important it is, and what we are doing exactly why it is so important, because I think now and during this crisis, when there are lots of talks about small businesses and about supporting them, and people are starting to realize how what purchasing power they have, how each order or each purchase they have can make an influence. And this is especially true for social entrepreneurs who, for example, provide jobs to vulnerable people for whom it's really it's so hard to find job anywhere else, for example. So it's really life-changing thing that they can do, and community
like tangible, right?
And,
so one purchase can have a really tangible impact.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is one thing, basically, to spread the word about social entrepreneurship and awareness, and asking to support social entrepreneurs mainly by purchasing their products, services, and so on. I'm also thinking, of course, we are also business like Sakshi, and I'm also thinking always in this entrepreneurial, from this entrepreneurial perspective, business perspective, but still now as we need to save resources, I think we can apply for pro bono support in certain cases, to volunteer help. This is more of a non-profit way of doing things, but in this situation, this could be also very helpful for us as social entrepreneurs. And maybe organizations like yours can help us to provide this support.
Facilitate that kind of services for you.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. To attract
and tell us about BiSocial. It's like what businesses you work with, how it all came about. And I feel like you and Sakshi have this thing in common of connecting these businesses with manufacturers locally. So that kind of, I'd love for that connection to be talked about.
Yeah, that's true. I also have this feeling when I listen to Sakshi. BiSocial is a social business. We find social entrepreneurs who in Russia, in different parts of Russia, who produce beautiful, good quality products, and at the same time have social, environmental, cultural mission. So, for example, I have some of these products with me at home. As for example, this is made. You see that it's handmade. It looks like really handmade and beautiful and unique. It's made in St. Petersburg by people with autism. This is one of the examples. This is creamed honey produced in the village in Urals, and so people don't have other job there. It's quite a poor village, and this enterprise created jobs for them. Chocolate, artisanal, 100% natural chocolate on honey instead of sugar, which is produced in Yaroslavsky region of Russia, also by people with disabilities and people from small village.
So it's products from like different categories. It's not just artisanal goods, it's food and everything. Yeah,
most of them are artisanal. These are small studios, small production organizations, companies. Some of them also, as you mentioned, exist both as business, as social business, as non-profit organization, providing all sorts of services to vulnerable people from vulnerable groups, like people with disabilities, physical or mental health, or people from orphanages, alumni of orphanages, or elderly people, and so on. There are also some organizations, some small productions, which donate money to charities, and this is their mission. That's why great. And some are producing eco-friendly products, like this notebook, which is produced by leftovers of paper, which thrown away, but they produced new notebook out of it. So what we do BiSocial is we find all these social entrepreneurs, producers in Russia, select the most beautiful products that they produce, and make catalogs for mainly companies. There is a big tradition in Russia to give gifts, also corporate gifts for New Year, 8th of March, International Women's Day, other holidays. as these are beautifully designed, made with love, artisanal products, they make very good gifts. So we make a catalog of gifts, gift sets in boxes with postcards and all that, with the branding of companies. And so we help this artisanal social producers to sell their products to big corporates and receive large orders. And another way we help them to sell their products is our showcase, our store on eBay. eBay in Russia was one of our clients here in Russia, and we together with them we came to this idea to showcase products of Russian social entrepreneurs on eBay so that people abroad from all the world can buy these products.
And so do you think you'll be pushed, well, as far as I understand, I mean, I know it, you work in a B2B model, and Sakshi does the same, right? So it's B2B at the moment. Do you think the crisis will push both of you to do, and Sakshi mentioned that already, to pivot or to change your business model to B2C? And what are the challenges in that process, and why it's probably a less than wanted option, or
yes,
how
exactly.
that will work?
Yeah, but I'm thinking about exactly the same thing about pivoting B2C. It is really, we tried it before, to be honest, and it didn't work that well as with B2B service, because it needs much more investment into marketing, logistics, and all these things. You need really to make lots of efforts to attract clients, and you need to have larger margin to cover all this extra costs. And with B2B, it's larger orders, which are very convenient for producers. You have some time in advance to make this order, to produce it, and so on. But still, we have some idea how to, and we already have experience. We have a bit of an advantage in working with B2C. We came with another idea, which I hope might help us to overcome these challenges. So we will also pivot. It's not already done product yet, already prepared. No, not yet, but we will try it again, for sure.
Yeah. And what are the challenges for you, Sakshi, to turn to B2C model? Why?
We're in the midst of testing it. I think when we initially started, we didn't focus on B2C because we knew that we could create a greater impact through B2B. But now, due to COVID, this has accelerated our need to test the B2C market. I think our margins are better at B2C than they are B2B, but B2B gives us a greater profit than B2C quicker. So in terms of like the best business and impact decision, B2B made sense. But how we're tackling B2C, you're right, marketing is so much more expensive. How we're sort of tackling it is partnering with social enterprises that are creating products that we can put in our bags, and then leveraging on each other's social media to help with that marketing strategy. We're launching this next week, so I don't know how that will go, but that's how we're approaching it for now.
Okay, I see. So I believe that, I think there's something that we can add to, Matt, your idea, your thoughts on how big businesses and philanthropists should step in, should not decrease the amount of their support. But I also feel like what I hear from the ladies, words is that big businesses should also think about social enterprises as potential contractors, right? Potential suppliers. And with this crisis, it's not only direct financial help that is important, but also any kind of supplier chain help could make a big difference. And do you have conversations with your partners and corporate partners about that kind of support for social entrepreneurs?
Often, yeah. And I'm firmly of the belief that that's probably the most valuable thing that you can offer a social enterprise that's set up in the traditional sense of a social enterprise. I think like one of the challenges. This is true of only the Foundation for Young Australians, not sort of more broadly. Because we tend to work with young people right at the beginning of their journey, and a lot of our partners are very like national banks and consultancies and very, very major institutes. That there's some degree of concern at their end, maybe not so much at my end, but at their end, about the social enterprise's capacity to provide their service at that sort of scale. So we have seen like a bit of reluctance to direct investment in that way. That's not to say it's not happened. Like we've connected an organization that provides plants to office buildings, and they go in and sort of service the plants over a period of time. We've had an organization that employs recently incarcerated people to deliver fruit. So stuff like that has happened, but sort of more broadly in Australia, it's a fairly like early movement, and I think the corporate world is slowly kind of catching up and seeing that, you know, their society sort of expects them to behave and source their materials in a way that's more ethical, and we're sort of slowly but surely seeing that materialize. And there's an organization called Social Traders who very much kind of leads that charge in Australia, and they've got a certification where they sort of say this is a credible social enterprise, and if you're a business, you should be purchasing your products from them.
Okay. Well, do you think COVID will speed up this process of big companies realizing that there are alternative suppliers, or it will slow it down? What's your prediction?
I hope so. Like I see that's like if corporate social responsibility is going to slow down, as is philanthropy, but they, you know, when the doors sort of open back up and they do need to continue to run their business, and they are thinking about how they can sort of support the world as we navigate our way through this, that there is some moral imperative that they would start thinking more about that. But I do really think it's very, very difficult to predict. And I think it might vary from organization to organization, to be honest. I couldn't say for certain. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty unpredictable right now. Well, I'm looking at the time. I know there are way more questions I could ask and like torture you for a little bit longer, but I wanted to ask the listeners, and I know we have quite, a few. If you have any questions that we could ask right now, please feel free to write them in the chat. And you can also write in Russian, and I'll translate. Don't worry about that. So just anything you'd like to know about Impact Hub or FYA, or maybe you'd like to share something about your businesses if you are social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs. Any comments? That'd be great to hear. And while people are probably responding and reacting, I think the final question from me would be, in this reality right now, I know there are probably some doubts among beginner entrepreneurs or beginner social entrepreneurs whether they should start now or not. And what could you tell them? Could you encourage them or warn them about something that you know better at this time? Any thoughts on this, you guys?
I find that to be an incredibly hard question, actually. Like, and there's two sides to it. Because I think on one side, like the competition for funding is so intense at the moment, and at your early stages, you're probably going to be reliant somewhat on philanthropy and CSR to get yourself off the ground, and to create more competition in that space at a sector kind of level is like, it's problematic. So that part of me thinks I would probably say like now's maybe not a good time, but the other part of me kind of sees that there are so many new and different and nuanced social issues that need addressing at the moment, and particularly in the work that we do, I think young people and social entrepreneurs more generally tend to be so creative and innovative in the way that they address them and think about them, that bringing that talent to the issues, I think, would be incredibly important. So I'd probably treat it on a case-by-case basis and try and understand what their lived experience of the issue is, and whether there's someone else operating in the space, how they're kind of thinking about going about addressing it. But I definitely wouldn't be closed off to it, but I think there's a couple of things to consider.
But is the FYA's door open? Like, are you happy to talk to people just having questions? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're 100. In fact, I'm having way less in-person meetings now, so it means I've got way more time for social entrepreneurs, which is the enjoyable part of my job.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Okay, so Sakshi, Luba, what do you think? As people who walk that path.
Well, I kind of agree with Matthew, because on one hand, I would say maybe you'd better wait for a couple of years when the economic situation gets better, and then start your social business. But on the other hand, as the world is changing and there are new needs that people have, and they might appear completely new niches which are not covered by the current businesses yet. So if you happen to find this niche, to see the opportunity, then maybe you will have really a very good competitive advantage if you be the first one in this completely new niche of business. Like even during this crisis, we saw that some sort of businesses, some sort of products and services were skyrocketing in their sales. Of course, it's Zoom, which we are using now. That's one example. But sales of, for example, many people are thinking, who are staying at home with their kids, they're thinking what we can do with our kids, what activities to do at home with them. They have no idea, when usually the kids are at school or kindergarten and so on. And now they are locked out at home. So these kind of products for like play and
new situations.
With all the this kind of things. If you have an idea, if you see this new need that people have in these circumstances, maybe you have a chance to be very successful. Actually, they always say that crisis is the not only a problem but also an opportunity. So if you see it that way, it's worth trying.
Thank you. Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to be like the risk-taking perspective.
We have different flavors here.
And my opinion on starting something now is, look, if it's not COVID, it's something else, and there's always going to be a reason not to start. So I think you just need to start. Also looking at case studies like Groupon. Groupon started in 2008 during a recession and was thriving during that time. And I think one of the reasons they were thriving, and it's something that an investor gave to me as advice, is like, you want to be solving a problem that's the top 3 priorities of your customer's mind. So if you want to sell to a corporate, you've got to think about what are the top 3 problems they're thinking about during COVID. One of them being, how do we connect all of our employees during this time? How do we make sure that employee engagement is just, and productivity is just as high as it was before? I can't think of the third one, but this is one of the reasons why Zoom is thriving. So the way I think about it is, whatever you're working on, try and solve the top 3 problems of your customer, like you would at any other time, whether that's COVID or something else, and be prepared for a hell of a ride, because it's not all fun, but it is very fun at some points in the journey.
Well, on this note, I think it's the
also,
perfect.
Sorry, before I forget, happy birthday, Luba.
Yes, I was just about to say happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Well,
thanks God.
And thank you for choosing to spend this beginning of this day with us. Beginning for us.
That's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you all. And Sakshi, thank you for your words. I think this is a great note to end on, a positive one. And I just wanted to say that Impact Hub is always open. Please reach out if you have ideas, either through our programs or just send us a message on Facebook, and we're happy to talk, discuss, and help. And I feel it's the same for FYA. So I hope
it definitely is.
yeah, we'll be there to support social entrepreneurs and change makers throughout, different circumstances in life. And thank you for this talk again, and have a good weekend. And for Luba, I think have a good rest of the day, work day, and for everybody else. And see you on our next episode. We'll continue doing this. So
thanks so much, Anna. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you for all the knowledge. Bye bye.
See you later.
See ya.